Started. We are on lecture 13, and we'll be jumping into a discussion of human capital, so basically education, and kind of wrapping up the health part of the course. Prom set 2 was delayed relative to the syllabus. It's been posted. It'll be due in a week, and the midterm will be the following Tuesday. So we're basically halfway through the course at this point. Any questions before we get started? Okay. So let's turn to education. We've been talking a lot about health and the relationship between health and development, and there are actually a lot of parallels with education. And in fact, in some economic discussions in many economic discussions of human capital, education and health are lumped together. You put time and effort into your schooling and into learning things. You also put time and money and effort into your health. If you don't eat well, you don't exercise, you don't get medical care, et cetera, your health deteriorates, and that can affect productivity. So health is another dimension of human capital. So these are closely related concepts. The observation to start with on education is very similar to the observation we made on health, which is to say that wealthier countries tend to have lots more schooling than poor countries. We already discussed this early on. We talked about differences between sub-Saharan Africa and other regions of the world, but sort of disentangling what education does to individual lives has been more challenging for a lot of the same reasons as for health. Those who are wealthier can afford more schooling. Maybe that's part of the reason why they get more schooling. At the same time, more education can make people better off because it increases their skills. So we're back in the same sort of omitted variable bias problem that we've been discussing so much the last few weeks. It's also worth noting, and we touched on this a little bit before, that there's very unclear macroeconomic evidence on the links between education and economic growth. So the case of Kenya is interesting. Kenya rapidly ramped up its schooling levels in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, and really until the last 10 years or so, growth rates were very slow. So it wasn't like investing in schooling was immediately going to improve economic growth. Now, there's some very good reasons why you might have seen that kind of pattern. One of the most obvious reason is if government or households invest in education, the education of their children, it takes a long time for those children to be workers, and it takes an even longer time for the majority of the working age population to be people who benefited from that big increase in educational investment. So it isn't like we can just invest in education today and think like, boom, development's going to happen tomorrow. It may take 40 years until the majority of the population, the working age population, is educated. So there are going to be some time lags. Some of the questions I want you guys to have in the back of your minds as we discuss education in the next few lectures is, why do people invest in education? Why do societies invest in education? These two questions, they're related, but they may be different. And that's something to think about going forward. People invest in education to get a better job and to earn more money. That's part of why they do it. That's a lot of what economists focus on when we talk about human capital. But people get education for many other reasons. They may get education because, partially, in some cases, because it's a social experience. They may get it because they really enjoy reading Shakespeare or just learning how the world works. So there's a lot of motivations that go into these educational investment decisions, and sort of long-run labor market payoffs may only be a subset of those explanations. In terms of why societies invest in education, again, there's going to be some sort of productive rationale. You hear this all the time from politicians. We need a well-educated workforce to compete in the global economy, all that kind of rhetoric. But societies also expand education for other reasons. So there's often, historically especially, big expansions in education went hand in hand with attempts to build national identity. They went hand in hand with nation-building programs. So in a lot of countries, mass public education also served a role of educating people about the history of their country, about their civic institutions, about their responsibilities as citizens. And of course, when the state is playing that kind of role, whether you call that kind of education information transmission or indoctrination, there's no way to really separate, distinguish between those two. So there's some interesting, cases from Europe, famous historical cases of, the case of France is famous here, where in the early 1800s, a minority of people in France even spoke French. By 1900, the vast majority of people in France spoke French and saw themselves as French, whereas 100 years earlier they didn't. There were many different ethnic groups and minorities and nationalities in France that didn't see themselves as French, but through mass public education, they spoke French 100 years later and they saw themselves as French. And that's a huge transformation for society. And I think we can probably think of many other cases that are similar. We're going to speak not today, but either next lecture or in 2 lectures about the sort of impact of education on social and political attitudes. So that's, again, a little different than this focus on the sort of wage-earning gains you get from education, but probably historically very important when we think of why societies invest in education. So that's just kind of some of the big picture. Now, beyond this kind of big picture, if we start focusing in on some specific claims that are made, I'm not going to take a stance on the research evidence on these claims because for some of them there's not a ton of evidence. There's a claim in development that one reads about and hears about all the time that education is critical for child health, that having educated mothers is critical for reducing infant mortality. So in the data, and again, we don't know what the omitted variable bias is, but in the data, in African data, for every year of schooling on average that women have in a society, you see this substantial drop in infant mortality. Whether that's a causal relationship or not, I don't know, maybe, but there's a strong pattern. That's one relationship. Another claim that's often made, which again seems plausible, just like the first claim, is that education speeds up the adoption of new technologies. So if you start, try to distribute a new agricultural technology, maybe a high-yielding crop variety, or a new health technology, in most data sets we can look at, more educated people are the first ones to adopt, or the early adopters of that technology. So again, if we think that those new technologies are critical for boosting productivity and allowing society to reach various agricultural, health, and educational goals, or other goals, then education could be central in speeding up that whole process. So that's another claim that is that's often made. And then related to the point I was just discussing before, there's this claim very often made that more educated people make better citizens. That more educated people read newspapers, can kind of parse language and understand political debates and policy discussions better than less educated people. And basically, you need education for a well-functioning democracy. And if you try to democratize before you have an educated population, you're not going to get a well-functioning democracy because people just won't get it. They won't be able to even, let's say if they're illiterate, read the arguments of the different parties and make an informed decision. So this is another argument that's made. And a lot of people have pointed to the role of educated, well, male and female, but definitely including females, educated urban populations in being central to some of the Arab Spring movements of a few years ago. So these are some of the claims that are out there. What are some other aspects of society other than direct earning in the labor force that you've heard education might affect or that you believe education might affect beyond these? Radhika. Okay. I see. What part of Singapore are you from? Sorry, I'm just joking. You're not allowed to chew gum, right? Yeah. So beyond these, maybe it's related to citizenship, but a different spin. That maybe educated people are more informed of the rules and more kind of bought into the rules, and so they won't take behavior that others find unhygienic or offensive. So that could be another one. Yep.
So an extension of the third would be that the more educated society would push for better policies and positive have people positive.
Yeah. So if we have these better citizens who are informed, then they're going to hold politicians to account, maybe. And if they do, then maybe we'll get better public policy, less corruption. Basically, an informed citizenry will lead to better public outcomes. I think that's the hope. Was your hand up? So the sort of cultural output of society is almost certainly going to be linked, or at least certain forms of cultural output are going to be very closely linked to education, because you can't even produce some arts without training and literacy and other things. And so the more people who have those basic educational skills, the more of that sort of outpouring of culture you might have. Is there a hand in the back? Yeah. Oh, both of you? Or? Yeah. You're saying as people are more educated, they're just going to, okay, you're going to affect the efficiency with which you use inputs. And so that is an interesting point. We were talking about early on when we talked about the growth model, we talked about this technology, how effectively do you use inputs, basically. And there's different ways of thinking of human capital. One is human capital is an input on its own, but the other, and it's often modeled this way, is human capital basically contributes to that A term. It just allows you to utilize things more effectively if you're more educated. So that's another possibility. Your hand's up to you. That's right. So maybe there's something kind of beyond just general citizenship or these specific outcomes. There may be something empowering about education. So if there is mass education of both genders, you start narrowing the sort of traditional gaps that we see in most societies. And I think most people would agree with that claim or believe that. Yeah. Uh-huh. Uh-huh. That's right. So it's not just the people getting the schooling that may benefit. Society as a whole may benefit through various channels, but this would be one specific way that they could benefit, say, less educated people. Okay. So there's a lot of different things we could come up with. What we're going to do over the next few lectures is look at a few specific programs to try to get into the details of this in an African setting. And we're not going to get at all of these, but we're actually going to get a few of these points. We are going to talk about political and social attitudes and some broader benefits of education just beyond earnings. And I think that kind of broad perspective is very useful in this case. So I want to talk about a program that I worked on. You guys can see this paper on the reading list. This is the Kramer et al. Project. And this is a project that was targeted to girls. So a lot of the points that were just made, and even on the previous slide about there being a kind of gender-specific benefit to education may apply here. This is called the Girl Scholarship Program. It's a program that provided grants, basically a merit award, to Kenyan girls who did well on their tests. It's basically a way of rewarding academically high-achieving girls in grade 6 primary schools. So primary schools or elementary schools in Kenya go from grades 1 to 8, standards 1 to 8. And the idea behind the scholarship was that girls in grade 6 who performed well on tests would get their tuition paid for grades 7 and 8, and their family would also get cash. And I'll show you some of the amount, but like a pretty decent amount of cash. The total award was the equivalent of a month or two of earnings for these households. So decent money. And the idea is this amount of money, which is a decent amount of money in Kenya, but not an extravagant amount of money in foreign aid budget, say, is this kind of money something that can boost the outcomes of these girls? And grade 6 girls were chosen very specifically. We were working with an NGO, the same NGO that did the deworming project, and they were very concerned about adolescent girls in Kenyan schools because there's very sharp, at the time, it's changed a little bit since then, at the time, about a decade ago, there were very sharp increases in dropout rates for girls in grades 5, 6, and 7, right around there, as they kind of entered adolescence. Till that point, school enrollment rates were very similar for boys and girls, and they started diverging basically right at that point. So the question is, was this merit scholarship going to work in keeping at least the high-achieving girls in school and pay for their tuition so they could finish primary school, finish grade 8, take the primary school exam, and if they did well in that exam, there could be possibilities for secondary school scholarships, et cetera. So it was an attempt to help that population of girls. And there was also a hope, and I'll show you what the evidence is on this, there was a hope that this incentive, once it was out there, might actually inspire not only the kind of top-performing girls, but other girls to sort of strive to get the scholarship. That they would work hard with the hope that they might get the scholarship, and therefore kind of benefit a broader swath of the population. So the project was a pretty large project. It was in about 60-something treatment schools and control schools, so a little bit bigger than the deworming study. The deworming study was in 75 schools, and it's in not exactly the same area as the deworming study. It was a little bit north of there. So also in Busia district, but a little bit farther north. And the way it worked, the details were, it was the top 15% of girls in the program schools who received an award, and the total cash value of the award for school fees as well as cash for the family was $38. So per capita income in exchange rate terms, because the $38 are given sort of kind of turned into shillings and given out, per capita income in exchange rate terms during this period was maybe $400-something. So it's about a month's worth of earnings for somebody. So it's a decent amount of money. The program took place in 2 districts, Busia district and Teso district, the neighboring district. And the way it works is we had to work with the educational authorities in each district. Was we said, look, within our treatment schools in this program, the program schools, in your district, the top 15% are going to win the scholarship. So in total, that was about 200 girls who won a scholarship. So the top 15% in the Busia schools, that was about 110 of them. They got the award. The top 90, which is 15% in the Teso schools, won. And it wasn't a separate contest school by school. It was a contest among all the program schools in Busia and all the program schools in Teso. So you see that there were like 64 treatment schools. About I think 38 of them or 40 of them were in Busia, and the other 20-something were in Teso. So that's how it works. Girls in those 30-something Busia schools were competing against all the other girls in those 30-something Busia schools, the grade 6 girls, for these scholarships, and the girls in the 20-something Teso schools in grade 6 were competing against each other. And the reason why I mention that is there's this immediate reaction that you might have that, well, look, if there's only one of us in our school who's going to win, then we might sort of duke it out to win that scholarship, and there might be a very bitter kind of environment, see who's going to be one of the top 2 girls. But it wasn't a zero-sum game in that way, because you were competing against people in dozens of schools. There was a hand up. Your hand was up? Yeah, and the $38 includes also the school fees that were paid. So the $38 are 2 years of payment. So it's $19 per year for grades 7 and 8 for both school fees and a cash prize. So the cash prize was something along that size per year, and then the rest was school fees. So that's how it worked out to be a total cash prize of $38. But so there was this distinction. Part of the money was paid to the school and school fees. Part was just given as $12 like in cash in the family's hands, and they were asked to use it to basically promote the education of the girl, to buy her school supplies or books or whatever she needed. In reality, there was no follow-up on these hundreds of winners. How exactly did they spend the money? Yeah. The reason it was 15% is because the NGO knew how many girls were in these schools, and they knew how much budget they had to give in scholarships, and then it worked out to be like 15%. If they had more money, maybe it would have been 20%, or maybe they would have done something else. I think doing it this way sort of imposes a little bit less risk on the NGO because they had set an absolute standard. And imagine if people had worked so hard and met that standard, then the NGO wouldn't have had money for the scholarship. So they did it this way. Yeah. $400 per capita income in this area. Yeah, $38 prize. Yeah. Any other questions on the structure? Yeah. There's huge variation, actually. I don't have much on it in my slide, but I can tell you about it, which is once this scholarship program was launched, and I'll show you the results, but there were some schools that got lots of the winners and some schools that got no winners. There was a lot of variation across schools. And, variation there's a lot of variation in average school test scores. So in this area, and I'll show you the map in a little bit, there were a couple of areas that were near medium-sized towns. I mean, this is still kind of rural Western Kenya, but there's some medium-sized towns with 15 or 20,000 people. And then there's other schools that are in more remote rural areas. And you just have like very different education levels among parents in those areas. The schools are better equipped in the towns. And a lot of those better off schools ended up grabbing the scholarships, basically. So there was a lot of heterogeneity there. I think it was something like, and I forget the exact number, I think 2/3 of the schools, or 3/4 of the schools in either year had at least one winner. So most schools had at least one winner at some point, but there were some schools that had 8 winners. So, yeah. Yeah, so these were all government schools. And the way Kenyan schools worked then, and the way they still mostly work now, is the government provides funding for the teacher salaries, and the government provides some money for other supplies, but there's also a lot of local fundraising. So basically parents kick in additional money. And after about 2002, 2003, the government in Nairobi for a few years was actually doing a better job of providing more of the school supplies, but then over time they haven't done as good a job, so there's now more kind of community fundraising. Again, but these are public schools. Teachers are basically funded by the government. Yeah. Yeah, so the way we did it is when it was announced, people were only eligible to compete in the school they were enrolled in when the program was announced. So we basically told people that so there wouldn't be an incentive for all the students to crowd into these schools. It's a very good question. But we had thought of it, thankfully, and sort of said, look, it wouldn't be fair to swamp these schools and not others. So it was like, look, this is where you're at. This is the school you've chosen to enroll in. This is your eligibility. And actually, this program was done for 2 years. There were the grade 6 girls in 2001 and then the grade 6 girls in 2002. But even the grade 6 girls in 2002, we defined their eligibility for the program based on where they were in grade 5 the previous year. So it was a bit strict in that way. Yeah. Yeah, so the advantage of doing it school by school would be what you said, and even the weaker schools would have some winners. The NGO, in general, this NGO we worked with was very concerned always about creating divisions within communities. And that was a big part of the reason why the deworming study was done at the school level. So when we started discussing the program with them initially, and we hadn't really thought through the externalities that much, we said, hey, there's some existing studies on deworming. They randomize within schools. It's sort of better statistically. You get lots more observations, a lot of variation within schools, which is good statistically. And the NGO was like, absolutely not. We can't introduce that inequality within communities. That was their position, which makes a lot of sense. And they felt the same way here. So actually having the competition within each school would create this potentially negative dynamic within schools. So this was thought to be a way to do it that was less disruptive. So that was really a very important reason why they did it this way. Yeah. No, there wasn't. And I'll talk about how in some areas people weren't even that excited about the program. But I'll come back to that later on. There was a lot of variation in how well received the program was. In some areas people were really excited about it, and others not so much. There's another hand up here, or over here. Yeah, so in general, in those academically better town schools, people tend to go farther and get more schooling. Yeah, so again, there's an irony, right? Like this program is basically targeted to keep these girls who are at this vulnerable juncture in school, and the say parental education levels of the winners is just much higher than the parental education levels of the non-winners. So it wasn't like the poorest of the poor got this funding. Of course, that's an issue with lots of merit programs everywhere. Unless you design them properly, and you were pointing to one way, which is maybe restricting the pool to the truly vulnerable, then you may not be able to benefit the poorest. Yeah. Yeah, all of them got the same size prize. So it wasn't sort of gradual. It's like 0 or 1, and we'll take advantage of that in some of the analysis later. So the question we ask is, what does this incentive do? Does it affect schooling? If you basically dangle this prize out in front of people, do they learn more? Do they do better on tests? Do they study more? And then why? I mean, do parents do something different? Do parents now say, hey, you don't need to do your chores this week. There's a lot of money on the line. Study. Whereas before, maybe they didn't see much benefit to having these girls study. Are the girls studying more? Are the teachers doing something different? The question is, what's changing? And so we collected survey data, not just to get at the test score effects, but to try to understand what else was changing in these communities when education became a sort of higher stakes activity. There's been some interest in our study. Actually, there's been more interest in the results of the study in rich countries like the US than in poor countries, just because a lot of US districts have moved towards more high-stakes testing earlier on in school than they had been in the past. So these issues of how to sort of incentivize students and have become very, very salient here as well. Okay, so let's have a clicker question, and I'll ask you guys the question. Oops. There I am. Okay, so if you think about all these ways that education might be affected by the Girls' Scholarship Program, which do you think is likely to be most important? Which type of behavior is going to be most likely to be affected? Teacher attendance or effort, student school participation, student test scores, parental involvement, all of the above? I only have 5 categories. I don't know, so I couldn't do none of the above. But if you think it's none of the above, just raise both hands and shake them around now. I won't embarrass you. Don't look at the paper. Don't open your computer and look at the paper. Not right now. Look at it after. Okay, 10 more seconds.